When Air Force veteran Daniel Carter left town to visit his son, HOA President Gregory Whitman saw the perfect opportunity to erase his home. No warning, no legal right, just pure personal revenge. For years, this smug tyrant ruled over the neighborhood, abusing his power and intimidating homeowners. But this time, he went too far, forging documents and hiring bulldozers to wipe out everything Daniel had built. What he didn't realize, Daniel's son was a corporate lawyer, and he was about to dismantle Whitman and his entire corrupt empire piece by piece. And when justice finally struck, leaving the HOA in ruins and Whitman in handcuffs, one question remained. How had he gotten away with it for so long? And just how satisfying was his downfall? Daniel Carter had barely been gone a week. A retired Air Force veteran, he had served his country for 30 years, putting his life on the line more times than he could count. He had faced enemies overseas, survived war zones, and endured hardships most people couldn't fathom. But the battle that would shake him to his core wasn't in some foreign land. It was in his own backyard. His house, the one place where he had finally found peace, stood on a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Georgia. It wasn't just a house. It was a testament to everything he had fought for. He had spent years making it his own. A ramp for his wheelchair, reinforced walls for insulation, a sunroom where he could sit in the afternoons and lose himself in a book. It was more than bricks and wood. It was his home. But Gregory Whitman had other plans. Whitman had been itching to get rid of Daniel for years. As the self-important, power-drunk president of the North Briarwood Homeowners Association, he saw himself not just as a leader, but as a ruler. His word was law. And Daniel? He was the thorn in his side, the one homeowner who had refused to bow to his authority. Daniel had opted out of the HOA agreement when he bought his house. He made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with their ridiculous fines for things like mailbox color or non-standard front yard plants. But that didn't stop Whitman from trying. He sent warning letters, then fines, then threats of liens. None of it worked. Daniel knew his rights. That infuriated Whitman. So when Daniel left town to visit his son, Whitman saw his chance. It started early, before most of the neighborhood had even had their coffee. A bulldozer, bright yellow and looming, rumbled down the street, stopping in front of Daniel's house. Hired by the HOA under a falsified emergency demolition order, it stood like a predator, waiting for its command. Whitman, standing on the curb with his arms crossed, smirked. The operator hesitated. "You sure about this?" Whitman didn't even blink. "Code violations. Severe safety hazard. Tear it down." Then the engine roared. The first hit came down like a hammer. The front porch, Daniel's carefully built wheelchair-accessible entryway, splintered under the force of the steel blade. Wood cracked, glass shattered. The next hit, straight through the living room. Inside, pictures of Daniel's late wife, his military awards, his father's old hunting rifle, all still in place. The impact sent them flying into the dust. A woman across the street let out a scream. "Oh my God, his things are still in there." Several neighbors ran out horrified. Some filmed, some yelled, but no one could stop it. A man in his 60s, Mr. Green, stormed up to Whitman. "This is insane. He's not even in the HOA. This is illegal." Whitman gave a condescending shrug. He failed to comply with community standards. This is what happens. The bulldozer kept going. Daniel's sunroom, the place where he sat with a book and a cup of coffee every morning, collapsed in seconds. His bedroom, where he had framed pictures of his Air Force squadron on the walls, obliterated. Everything he had built, reduced to rubble. By the time the last wall came down, there was nothing left. Daniel's phone rang just after noon. He was sitting at a cafe with his son Alex, enjoying a rare moment of peace. He answered with a smile. "Hey neighbor, what's up?" The voice on the other end was frantic. "Daniel, they tore it down." Daniel blinked. "What?" "Your house. It's gone. The HOA, Whitman, he brought a bulldozer." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Daniel's face went white. His hand shook as he put the phone on speaker. "They demolished everything," the neighbor said, voice breaking. "Your medals, your photos, your wife's things. It's all gone." For the first time in his life, Daniel Carter, Air Force veteran, survivor of countless battles, felt completely powerless. Alex had never seen his father cry, not when his wife passed. Not when the VA made him fight for benefits, but now, as Daniel clenched his fists, his breathing heavy, his eyes filled with something colder than tears. A storm was coming. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Alex Carter kept his grip firm on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. His father hadn't spoken much since the call, just a quiet, barely there, "Let's go." That was it. No anger, no shouting. Just those two words. And that silence? That scared Alex more than anything. Because Daniel Carter was a man who had survived everything. Combat missions in the Middle East, losing his wife to cancer, a lifetime of fighting battles most people never even knew about. And yet now, he sat in the passenger seat, still as stone, staring out the window with an expression Alex had never seen before. Defeat. That's what made Alex's stomach twist in knots. Not the fact that some HOA scumbag had pulled this move. He could deal with that. But seeing his father like this, that was different. That was personal. When they pulled onto the street, the emptiness was the first thing Alex noticed. Where Daniel's house had stood for years, where he had spent his mornings drinking coffee in his sunroom, where Alex had visited every Thanksgiving, there was nothing. Just a pile of rubble. The ground was uneven, torn up from where the bulldozer had ripped through the foundation. Pieces of wood, drywall, and shattered glass littered the dirt like discarded scraps. The porch swing Daniel had built by hand lay snapped in half. Alex put the truck in park, but neither of them moved. His father was still staring. For a moment, Alex thought he wasn't going to get out. Then, with the slow, deliberate movements of a man carrying a weight too heavy for words, Daniel pushed the door open and stepped out. He walked forward, his boots crunching over the debris, his expression unreadable. Alex followed, his chest tight. Daniel moved slowly through what was left of his home, his fingers brushing over the remnants of walls that had once kept him safe. His eyes lingered on a half-buried frame, the flag that had once hung in his living room, the one folded neatly, given to him at his retirement ceremony after 3 decades of service. It was covered in dust and dirt, but Daniel bent down, picked it up, and carefully brushed it off. His shoulders sagged. Alex swallowed the lump in his throat. "Jesus, Dad," he murmured, because what else could he say? Daniel didn't answer. He just held the flag in his hands, his fingers tightening around the fabric. His knuckles were white. The silence was deafening. Then, the beep of a notification broke through it. Daniel pulled his phone from his pocket, eyes narrowing at the screen. An email. Alex watched as his father opened it, his brows furrowing as he read. Then something shifted. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. Wordlessly, he turned the screen toward Alex. The subject line hit like a slap to the face. Final notice. Unauthorized structure removal completed. Alex snatched the phone, scanning the text. "Dear Mr. Carter, as you failed to comply with the neighborhood's aesthetic and structural standards, the HOA board has taken action in the best interests of the community. Your non-compliant structure has been removed per regulatory oversight. Please be advised that further failure to adhere to HOA guidelines may result in additional penalties and fees." No apology, no explanation, just this. Alex exhaled sharply, his pulse spiking with something dark and simmering. He stopped himself before the curse left his lips, closing his eyes briefly, willing the fury down. When he spoke again, his voice was low and controlled, dangerous. "They think they can just erase you?" Daniel didn't respond, but his grip on the flag in his hands tightened. Alex looked around at the wreckage, his father's life, reduced to debris, the memories, the history, the home, all gone because of some power-hungry HOA dictator. No, this wasn't going to stand. Alex turned back to his father. Daniel had spent his whole life fighting battles he hadn't asked for. He had fought for his country, for his family, for everyone else. But this time, this was Alex's fight. He clenched his fists, his jaw set in cold determination. They were going to pay. Gregory Whitman thought he was untouchable. For years, he had built his reign of terror over North Briarwood, treating the HOA like his personal fiefdom. He ran it like a dictator. His word was final, his decisions unquestionable. If a homeowner pushed back, he buried them in fines, legal threats, and harassment. If they complained, their concerns mysteriously got lost in the system. He had gotten away with it for years. But he had never faced someone like Alex Carter. And this time, Whitman had gone too far. Because when he ordered a bulldozer to destroy a disabled veteran's home under a forged legal order, he made the biggest mistake of his life. The lawsuit wasn't just fast. It was merciless. Within 48 hours, Alex had filed a civil suit demanding millions in damages. This wasn't just about property. This was personal, unlawful destruction of property, elder abuse, fraud, harassment, and intimidation. But Alex wasn't just a man looking for revenge. He was a corporate lawyer with 10 years of experience tearing apart multi-million-dollar companies in court. Whitman was a fraud with a power trip, and he was about to learn what real power looked like. Alex didn't just file a lawsuit. He started digging, because if a man was willing to bulldoze someone's home out of spite, Alex knew damn well this wasn't his first abuse of power. What Alex uncovered was worse than he expected. It wasn't just the demolition order that was forged. The so-called complaints from neighbors, completely fake. The supposed vote by the HOA board to approve the demolition didn't happen. Whitman had fabricated everything, but that wasn't even the worst part. As Alex dug deeper, he found something that turned this case from a lawsuit into a potential criminal investigation. Whitman had been stealing from the HOA, siphoning HOA fees into his personal accounts, funneling money through fake maintenance projects, imposing bogus fines on homeowners, and pocketing the money. For years, Whitman had been lining his pockets while bullying homeowners into silence. Alex compiled everything: emails, bank statements, sworn testimonies. By the time he was done, he wasn't just preparing for a lawsuit. He was preparing for a reckoning. Whitman walked into the courthouse smug, wearing a navy blue suit and the same condescending smirk he always had. To him, this was a joke, just another angry homeowner throwing a tantrum. He barely even looked at Daniel, who sat beside Alex at the plaintiff's table, his back straight, despite the weight of everything he had lost. But as the hearing started, Whitman's smirk began to fade. Because Alex didn't just present a case, he unleashed hell. The emails, the bank transfers, the false records. Alex laid it all out piece by piece, methodically exposing every lie, every theft, every abuse of power. One by one, terrified former HOA board members testified against Whitman. Homeowners who had been bullied into silence finally spoke up. The judge's expression darkened with every revelation. Whitman started sweating. Then came the final blow. Alex turned to the judge and slid a folder across the table. Your Honor, this contains direct evidence that Mr. Whitman personally embezzled over $300,000 from HOA funds over the past 5 years. The courtroom went silent. Whitman's attorney paled. Whitman froze. Then the judge, an older woman with a reputation for zero tolerance toward corruption, leaned forward. Her face was red with fury, her voice sharp as a blade. Mr. Whitman, would you like to explain why this court should not refer your actions for criminal prosecution? Whitman opened his mouth, but for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. The courtroom was silent when the judge finally spoke. Her voice was steady, but the underlying anger was unmistakable. This court finds the North Briarwood Homeowners Association guilty of unlawful destruction of property, elder abuse, harassment, and fraud. The plaintiff, Mr. Daniel Carter, is awarded damages in the amount of $2.5 million. A murmur rippled through the room. The HOA's attorneys looked like they had just been punched in the gut. Whitman? He didn't move. His face, once smug and full of arrogance, was now ashen. But the judge wasn't done. In addition, she continued, this court finds Gregory Whitman personally liable for willful misconduct and financial fraud. Mr. Whitman, you are hereby stripped of your position as HOA president. Furthermore, she paused, her piercing gaze settling on him. You will be remanded into custody pending criminal investigation. The courtroom exploded, a gasp from the audience. The shuffle of feet as 2 uniformed deputies stepped forward. Whitman finally snapped out of his daze. His jaw clenched, his hands tightened into fists. This is a joke, he muttered under his breath. This is, He turned as if to argue, but the cold click of handcuffs locking around his wrists shut him up fast. Whitman's face burned red. As the officers grabbed his arms, guiding him toward the door, he turned one last time and locked eyes with Daniel and Alex. "You think you've won?" he sneered, his voice laced with venom. Alex, who had sat calmly through the entire proceeding, simply leaned forward. His smile was razor sharp. "Oh, we haven't even started." It didn't take long for the dominoes to fall. The HOA was completely dismantled by the county within a month. As Alex had predicted, Whitman's crimes ran deep. When news of the lawsuit spread, more homeowners came forward. More stories of illegal fees, intimidation tactics, and fraudulent foreclosures surfaced. Bank records showed hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from HOA accounts. By the time the state attorney general got involved, the entire board was under investigation. Several former HOA members resigned overnight, trying to escape the fallout. But it was too late. The county dissolved the HOA permanently. North Briarwood would never be under the control of people like Whitman again. With the HOA in ruins and the lawsuit won, Daniel finally had what he needed. He didn't just rebuild his home. He made it bigger, twice as big, twice as strong, and he did it on the HOA's dime. Construction crews rolled in within weeks, leveling the debris and pouring the new foundation. Neighbors, some of whom had been too afraid to stand up to the HOA before, showed up to help. The same spot where Whitman had ordered a bulldozer to erase Daniel's life. Now? It was a brand new home, custom built exactly how Daniel wanted it. No HOA to dictate what color his mailbox should be. No petty tyrants trying to run him out. And when the final touches were done, when the last shingle was in place and the driveway freshly paved, Daniel rolled up to his new front porch. He stepped out of his truck, his cane in one hand, a massive American flag in the other. With slow, steady movements, he attached the flag to the newly built porch post. Then he stepped back, looking up as it unfurled in the breeze. This time, nobody was going to take his home away again.